Dr. Alex Thompson wiped the sweat from his face as he looked at the strange metal structure buried deep in the red dirt of Kepler 442b. The planet was supposed to be empty, just another dead world at the edge of known space. His team had come here to study old rocks and maybe find some interesting minerals. What they found instead was something that would change everything. The metal was unlike anything Alex had seen before. It looked old, really old, but it still gleamed like it was made yesterday. Strange symbols covered its surface, symbols that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. His scanning tools gave readings that made no sense. The metal was older than the planet itself, which was impossible. Lisa Martinez stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council building on the planet Unity. As Earth's ambassador, she had spent 300 years keeping humanity's biggest secret. Around her, representatives from 800 different alien species talked about trade routes and mining rights. They all believed humans were young and weak, barely worth noticing in the grand scale of galactic politics. Lisa made sure they kept believing that the communication device on her wrist buzzed softly. A message from Earth marked with the highest security code. Her heart skipped a beat. Only one thing could trigger that code, and she prayed it would never happen. She excused herself from the meeting and walked quickly to her private office. Back on Kepler 442b, Alex's teammate Dr. Nancy Foster ran her hands over the metal surface. The symbols seemed to respond to her touch, glowing faintly with blue light. Nancy was the team's expert on alien technology, but this was nothing like the tech used by any known species. It was too clean, too perfect, too advanced. "Alex, you need to see this," Nancy called out. She had found what looked like a control panel hidden under centuries of dust. The moment she cleaned it off, the entire structure began to hum with power. Captain Maria Santos was 3 star systems away when her ship's sensors detected the energy spike from Kepler 442. BSS Horizon was on routine patrol, keeping an eye on the outer territories where pirates sometimes caused trouble. But this energy reading was off the charts. It was the kind of power signature that could only come from advanced alien technology, the kind that started wars between species. Maria ordered her communications officer to scan all frequencies. What they heard made her blood run cold. Alien. Voices from dozens of different species, all talking about the same thing. A signal had been broadcast across the entire galaxy, a signal that contained star charts showing human presence on thousands of worlds. The problem was that, according to all official records, humans had only been in space for 400 years on Earth. Admiral Jack Coleman sat in a room deep underground beneath the Global Defense Council headquarters. The room had no windows, and only one door. Inside this room were files that contained humanity's greatest secret, files that only a handful of people were allowed to read. Jack was one of those people, and right now he wished he wasn't. President Claire Watson entered the room with worry written all over her face. She had just received the emergency report from Kepler 442b after all these years. After all the careful planning and lies, their secret was about to come out? How bad is it? Claire asked as she sat down across from Jack. "Bad," Jack replied, pulling up a holographic display. "The beacon that Thompson's team activated has sent out data that shows human settlements across the galaxy dating back 12,000 years. Every alien species with a decent sensor array has picked up the signal." Claire closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. "Protocol Omega, already in effect," Jack said. "But I don't think we can contain this one. The data is too clear, too widespread. They're going to figure out that we've been lying to them for 3 centuries. Back on Kepler 442b, Alex and Nancy watched in amazement as the ancient structure continued to come to life. Lights flickered on throughout the metal framework, and machinery that had been silent for thousands of years began to move. The symbols on the walls grew brighter, forming patterns that looked almost like star maps. "This is human technology," Nancy whispered, though she could hardly believe her own words. "These symbols, this design philosophy, it's all human, but that's impossible." Alex was thinking the same thing. According to everything they had been taught, Humans had only developed faster-than-light travel in the 21st century. They were newcomers to the galaxy, barely worthy of notice by the older, more advanced alien civilizations. Yet here was proof that humans had been building impossible machines thousands of years before they were supposed to have left Earth. The beacon continued to transmit, sending its message to every corner of the galaxy. The signal was simple but devastating. It showed star charts marking human colonies on worlds that were now controlled by alien species. It showed dates that predated every known human achievement by millennia. Most importantly, it showed that humanity was not what they claimed to be. Lisa Martinez received another urgent message, while she was still processing the first one. This one was from Captain Santos, reporting that alien intelligence networks were already buzzing with activity. The various species were confused and alarmed. Some were demanding explanations from their human contacts. Others were quietly preparing. Their military forces, unsure if this revelation represented a threat, Lisa knew she had to act fast. She composed a carefully worded message to Earth requesting immediate instructions. But she already knew what those instructions would be. After 12,000 years of hiding, humanity was about to be exposed. The young, innocent species that had joined the Galactic Council 3 centuries ago was about to be revealed as something much older and potentially much more dangerous. On Kepler 442b, the ancient structure reached full power. A holographic display appeared in the air above the control panel, showing the galaxy as it had been 12,000 years ago. Nancy and Alex stared in wonder at the image. It showed thousands of human colonies spread across multiple star systems, connected by trade routes and defended by massive space stations. It was an empire that spanned half the galaxy, an empire that had somehow vanished without a trace. The implications were staggering. If humans had once controlled this much territory, what had happened to them? Where had they gone? And why had humanity started over from scratch on Earth, pretending to be a young species just learning to explore? Space? As the two scientists studied the holographic display, they began to realize that they had stumbled upon the greatest secret in galactic history. Humanity was not what they seemed to be, and this discovery was about to shake the foundations of everything the galaxy believed about itself. Dr. Elena Rodriguez walked through the underground archives beneath Geneva, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber filled with files that officially did not exist. As Earth's chief xenohistorian, she was one of only 7 people alive who knew the complete truth about humanity's past. The emergency call from President Watson had brought her here at 3 in the morning, and she knew why. The hidden archives contained records that went back 12,000 years, records that told a story so incredible that most people would think it was science fiction. Elena pulled up the main historical database and began loading files onto a secure tablet. These files would have to be shared now, whether humanity was ready or not. Lieutenant Commander Jake Phillips sat in his office at Space Command, studying reports that made no sense. Ships across the galaxy were reporting that ancient ruins on dozens of worlds were suddenly coming to life. The ruins all showed the same design patterns, the same technology, and the same impossible age. Most disturbing of all, they were all clearly of human origin. Jake was a military historian, and he had spent years studying the official records of human expansion into space. According to those records, humans had first achieved faster-than-light travel in 2087 and had joined the Galactic Council in 2187. They were the newest species in galactic politics, barely worth noticing by civilizations that had been traveling between stars for millions of years, but these new discoveries suggested something completely different. Jake pulled up his personal files and began cross-referencing the ancient site locations with old Earth mythology. What he found made his hands shake as he typed. Every single ancient site corresponded to a location mentioned in human myths and legends, places where the old stories said gods had once lived and worked. Dr. Nancy Foster stood in the laboratory aboard the USS Horizon, studying samples from the beacon on Kepler 442b. The metal was definitely human in origin, but it was made using techniques that current human science couldn't explain. The atomic structure was too perfect, too ordered. It was as if someone had built it by arranging individual atoms by hand. Captain Santos entered the lab, looking worried. "We're receiving reports from all over the galaxy," she said. "Ancient installations are activating on every world where the beacon signal was received. The alien governments are demanding answers, and Earth isn't giving them any." Nancy looked up from her microscope. "Maria, this technology is thousands of years ahead of anything we can build today. Whoever made this beacon had capabilities that make our best science look like stone tools." "That's what scares me," Maria replied. "If ancient humans could build this, what else could they build? And why did they hide it?" Elena Rodriguez arrived at the presidential bunker as the sun was rising over Washington. President Watson was waiting for her in the secure briefing room, along with Admiral Coleman and a few other officials who were cleared to know the truth. Elena activated her tablet and projected a holographic timeline that filled the room. 12,000 years ago, humanity achieved technological advancement that we can barely imagine today, Elena began. They had spread across not just this galaxy, but several others. They could build structures that defied physics, travel instantly between stars, and manipulate matter at the quantum level. Admiral Coleman leaned forward. "Tell them about the war." Elena nodded grimly. Humanity wasn't alone in the ancient universe. They encountered something called the Shadows, entities from outside normal space and time. The Shadows consumed entire civilizations, feeding on their technology and knowledge. When they found humanity's vast empire, a war began that lasted for thousands of years. President Watson studied the timeline. "How do we know all this?" If it happened 12,000 years ago, how do we have records?" "Because our ancestors planned for this day," Elena replied. "They knew that eventually the truth would come out. They left hidden archives, secret installations, and coded messages. In human mythology, the stories of gods and heroes that we tell our children are actually historical records, disguised as myths to survive the centuries." Jake Phillips made a breakthrough in his research just as Elena was briefing the president. He had been analyzing the patterns in human mythology, comparing them to the locations of the activated ancient sites. What he discovered was that every major myth in human culture contained detailed information about the ancient empire. The Greek gods weren't mythical beings. They were the last generation of advanced humans. The stories of their great works and terrible wars were historical accounts of the shadow conflict. Even the story of Atlantis was real. It had been humanity's capital world in another galaxy, destroyed in the final battle. Jake sent his findings to Earth Command and then sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the implications. Humanity hadn't just forgotten their past, they had deliberately hidden it. The myths and legends were a backup system, a way to preserve the truth until humanity was ready to remember who they really were. Dr. Nancy Foster's analysis of the beacon technology revealed something even more disturbing. The device wasn't just transmitting historical data, it was actively scanning the galaxy for something. The energy patterns suggested it was looking for the same type of signatures that the ancient records associated with the shadows. "Maria, I think this beacon is a warning system," Nancy told Captain Santos. "It was left behind to watch for signs that the shadows might be returning." "Are you saying they're coming back?" Maria asked. "I'm saying the beacon thinks they might be," Nancy replied. "And if ancient humans thought it was necessary to leave this kind of warning system, then the shadows must be something truly terrible." Back in the archives, Elena was showing President Watson the most classified records of all. The files that explained what had happened in the final days of the ancient empire. Humanity had realized that they couldn't defeat the shadows through CONVN-IO warfare. The enemy was too powerful, too adaptable. Every weapon humans developed, the shadows learned to counter. So humanity had made the ultimate sacrifice. They had developed something called the Great Reset, a technology that could erase all traces of advanced civilization from the galaxy. They had used it to wipe out their own empire, destroying everything they had built over thousands of years. Every human colony was abandoned, Every technological marvel was hidden or destroyed. The reset had worked perfectly. Too perfectly. It had erased not just the physical evidence of human civilization, but also the memories. The survivors on Earth had forgotten their own history, believing themselves to be a primitive species just beginning to explore the world around them. "So we're not really a young species," President Watson said quietly. "We're the descendants of the most advanced civilization the galaxy has ever known." "That's correct," Elena replied. "And the shadows think we're extinct. They've been gone for 12,000 years, probably conquering other galaxies. But if the beacon is activating, it means they might be coming back." Admiral Coleman pulled up tactical displays showing the current state of galactic defenses. If these shadows are as powerful as the records suggest, then none of the current species would stand a chance against them. The combined fleets of the entire Galactic Council couldn't stop something that defeated ancient humanity. "Unless we remember who we used to be," Elena said. "The reset wasn't permanent. It was designed to be reversible when the time was right. The ancient installations that are activating across the galaxy, they're not just historical sites. They're arsenals containing technology and weapons that humanity built to fight the shadows." President Watson felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. For 3 centuries, humanity had maintained the lie that they were young and inexperienced. They had let alien species think of them as junior partners in galactic civilization. But the truth was that humanity had once been the dominant force in the galaxy, and they had given up that power to save everyone else. Now the choice was before them. They could continue hiding, hoping that the shadows would never return, or they could reveal the truth and prepare for a war that might be coming whether they wanted it or not. The beacon on Kepler 442b had already started the process. Soon, every species in the galaxy would know that humanity was not what they seemed to be. Elena closed her files and looked at the president. "The age of secrets is ending. The question now is whether we can remember who we used to be in time to save who we are today." Captain Steve Barnes felt his ship shake as they descended through the atmosphere of Arcturus Prime. The ice world had been a simple mining colony until 3 days ago, when the beacon signal from Kepler 442b had reached this far corner of the galaxy. Now the miners were reporting impossible things, structures that had appeared overnight and energy readings that broke their instruments. Steve commanded a joint expedition team made up of humans and aliens from 6 different species. The aliens had demanded to investigate the awakening sites after reports started coming in from across the galaxy. Ancient installations were activating on hundreds of worlds, all showing the same advanced technology and all clearly of human origin. The mining foreman, a gruff man named Pete Walsh, met them at the landing site. His face was pale and his hands shook as he pointed toward the excavation zone. "It started 3 days ago," Pete said. "First there was just a rumble underground. Then the ice began to crack. By morning, we had a structure the size of a city rising up from the permafrost." Steve looked at the massive complex that stretched to the horizon. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, made of the same impossible metal they had found. On Kepler 442b, the structure pulsed with soft light, and streams of energy flowed along its surface like liquid lightning. Dr. Rita Clark, the expedition's xenorchaeologist, ran her scanners over the nearest wall. The readings made no sense. According to her instruments, the metal was older than the planet itself, but it showed no signs of age or wear. It was as if time had no effect on it at all. "This violates everything we know about material science," Rita said to Steve. "This metal should have decayed into dust millions of years ago, but it's in perfect condition." The alien members of the team were having their own reactions. Commander Zoc of the Kronari military kept his hand on his weapon and muttered about human deception. The Zephyrian philosopher known as Deep Thought simply stared at the structure in what appeared to be religious awe. As they approached the main entrance, the massive doors began to open by themselves. A soft voice spoke from hidden speakers, using perfect English. "Welcome, children of Earth. You have grown much since we last saw you." Steve felt his blood freeze. The voice was human, but it sounded old beyond measure. It carried the weight of thousands of years and the sadness of someone who had seen too much. "Who are you?" Steve called out to the empty air. "I am what you might call the architect," the voice replied. "I am the last echo of those who came before, preserved here to guide you when the time came to remember." The team entered the structure and found themselves in a vast chamber filled with impossible technology. Machines that seemed to be made of pure light hummed with power, and holographic displays showed star charts that covered multiple galaxies. In the center of the chamber stood a single pedestal with what looked like a human brain suspended in glowing fluid. The ancient humans preserved their minds, Deep Thought whispered in amazement. They achieved digital immortality. The architect's voice came from speakers near the brain. "Not immortality, friend of distant stars. We chose to remain so that we could guide our descendants when the danger returned. We have been waiting for 12,000 years for someone to activate the beacons." Commander Zoc stepped forward, his weapon half drawn. "You deceived us. For 3 centuries, humans have pretended to be a young species. You made us think you were weak and harmless." "Because we needed to be," the architect replied. "The shadows hunt advanced civilizations. They are drawn to technology like predators to blood. The only way to protect this galaxy was to make them think humanity was extinct." Steve found his voice again. "The shadows are returning, aren't they?" "They never truly left," the architect said sadly. "They have been conquering other galaxies, growing in power and knowledge. Our sensors detect them at the edge of dark space, testing the barriers we left behind. They will break through soon." Dr. Clark was studying the holographic displays, her face growing pale as she understood what she was seeing. "These charts show the current positions of all major galactic civilizations. You've been watching us this entire time." "We had to," the architect explained. "The Great Reset was never meant to be permanent. It was a strategic retreat, a way to hide until the galaxy was ready to face the shadow threat. We have been waiting for the right moment to reveal ourselves and prepare for their return." Commander Lisa Hayes aboard the exploration ship Discovery received the transmission from Arcturus Prime and immediately understood the implications. She had been monitoring the awakening sites across her patrol sector, and they were all showing similar patterns. Ancient human technology coming online, preserved minds awakening from digital sleep, and warnings about something called the Shadows. Lisa was a career military officer, and she knew a preparation for war when she saw one. Whatever these shadows were, the ancient humans had been terrified enough of them to destroy their own civilization rather than face them directly. That level of fear from beings who could build technology that defied physics was deeply disturbing on Earth. President Watson convened an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. The reports were coming in from every corner of the galaxy. Ancient human installations were awakening on 500 different worlds. Each one contained preserved minds from the ancient civilization, and all of them were saying the same thing. "The shadows were coming back," Admiral Coleman presented. A tactical analysis. "Based on the data from the awakening sites, we're looking at an enemy that operates on principles we don't understand. They exist partially outside normal spacetime, which makes them nearly impossible to detect or track. They feed on technological advancement, growing stronger with each civilization they consume." Dr. Elena Rodriguez had spent the last 3 days translating ancient records with the help of the awakened minds. What she had learned made her wish she could forget it all. "The shadows aren't just conquerors," she told the council. "There's something far worse. They harvest the quantum information of everything they consume, using it to evolve and adapt. Every civilization they destroy makes them smarter and more dangerous." The implications were staggering. If the shadows had been conquering other galaxies for 12,000 years, they would have absorbed the knowledge and technology of countless species. They would be far more powerful now than when they had driven ancient humanity to desperate measures. President Watson looked around the room at the faces of Earth's military and scientific leaders. "How long do we have?" Unknown, Admiral Coleman replied. The ancient sensors detect them at the galactic edge, but they're using stealth technology that we can't penetrate. They could arrive tomorrow or in 10 years. All we know is that they're coming. The architect on Arcturus Prime provided more disturbing details to Steve's expedition team. The preserved mind explained that the shadows didn't just destroy civilizations, they corrupted them. Species that surrendered were transformed into shadow servants, twisted versions of their former selves that helped hunt down other civilizations. The war 12,000 years ago was not just about survival, the architect said. It was about preserving the fundamental nature of life itself. The shadows seek to transform the entire universe into something that serves their purposes. Commander. Zoc had put away his weapon, but his hostility remained. If these shadows are so powerful, why should we trust you? How do we know you're not leading us into a trap? The architect was silent for a long moment before responding. Because we could have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years if we had wanted to. Instead, we chose to hide, to let other species develop and flourish. We sacrificed our empire to give you a chance to exist. Deep thought spoke for the first time since entering the structure. The humans saved us all, and we never knew it. They gave up everything they had built so that we could build our own civilizations. Dr. Clark made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the ancient computers were detailed plans for weapons and defenses designed specifically to fight the shadows. But the plans required cooperation between multiple species, combining different technological approaches to create something the shadows couldn't adapt to quickly enough. The ancient humans knew they couldn't win alone, she told Steve. These plans require input from Chronari metallurgy, Zephyrian quantum mathematics, and at least 12 other species' unique technologies. They were planning for a future where all the galaxy's species would work together. Steve realized the full scope of what the ancient humans had done. They hadn't just hidden their technology, they had guided the development of other species to ensure that the right tools would be available when the shadows returned. Every alien civilization in the galaxy had been unknowingly prepared for this moment. The architect confirmed his suspicions. We seeded your cultures with mathematical concepts and technological principles that would lead you to develop the tools we would need. The diversity of approaches that different species have taken to similar problems is our greatest weapon against an enemy that adapts to any single strategy. As the expedition team prepared to leave Arcturus Prime with copies of the ancient plans, the architect made one final revelation. The awakening has begun, but it cannot be stopped or reversed. Every shadow sensor in Ambassador Lisa Martinez stood before the Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council, looking out at representatives from 847 different species. In 300 years of diplomatic service, she had never faced a moment like this. The chamber buzzed with tension as delegates whispered among themselves, all of them demanding answers about the human installations that had awakened across the galaxy. The Chronari delegate, General Vorthak, slammed his massive fist on his speaking platform. "Enough deception," he roared. "We demand the truth about these human sites. For centuries you have claimed to be a young species, barely worthy of council membership. Yet we find evidence of human technology that predates our oldest civilizations." Lisa took a deep breath and activated the central holographic display. The image that appeared showed the galaxy as it had been 12,000 years ago, with thousands of human colonies connected by trade routes and defended by massive space stations. Gasps echoed through the chamber as the delegates realized the scope of what they were seeing. "Honored representatives," Lisa began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "I stand before you today to reveal a truth that humanity has kept hidden for 12 millennia. We are not the young species you believe us to be. We are the survivors of the greatest civilization this galaxy has ever known." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted questions and accusations in hundreds of different languages. Some species representatives walked out in protest, while others demanded immediate military action. The Zephyrian speaker, Harmony of Thought, raised a crystalline hand for silence. Let her speak, Harmony of Thought said in their musical voice. If humans have hidden such a truth for so long, they must have had compelling reasons. Lisa continued her presentation, showing the evidence that had been discovered on the awakening worlds. Ancient human cities that spanned continents, technology that could reshape matter at the quantum level, and starships that could travel between galaxies in minutes. The assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as the true scope of humanity's former empire was revealed. Why? Asked the delegate from the peaceful Meridian Republic. Why would you abandon such power and pretend to be primitive? Because we faced an enemy that we could not defeat, Lisa replied. She activated another hologram, this one showing the dark shapes that had emerged from the void between galaxies 12,000 years ago. We called them the Shadows. They consumed entire civilizations, feeding on their technology and knowledge. The more advanced the species became, the more attractive they were to these entities. General Paul Wright, Earth's military representative, stepped forward to address the military implications. The war against the Shadows lasted for thousands of years. Every weapon we developed, every defensive strategy we deployed, they adapted to counter. In the end, we realized that conventional warfare was useless against them. A delegate from the Insectoid Hive Collective clicked their mandibles in confusion. Then how did you survive? By making the ultimate sacrifice, Lisa answered. Our ancestors developed something called the Great Reset, a technology that could erase all traces of advanced civilization from the galaxy. They used it to destroy their own empire, abandoning every colony and hiding every technological achievement. They made themselves appear extinct to the Shadows. The implications of this revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. Species that had built their entire identities around being ancient and advanced were learning that humans had given up far greater power than they had ever possessed. The political structure of the galaxy, built on the assumption of human weakness, was crumbling in real time. Admiral Sandra Davis presented the most disturbing evidence of all. Deep space monitoring stations had detected massive energy signatures, moving between galaxies, signatures that matched the ancient records of shadow technology. The enemy that forced humanity to destroy their own civilization is returning. Our long-range sensors show them testing the barriers at the galactic edge. The Architect's digital consciousness, transmitted from the awakening sites, addressed the Council directly. The ancient mind's voice filled the chamber with the weight of millennia. Children of the stars, the time of hiding is over. The Shadows have grown in power during their 12,000-year absence. They have consumed entire galaxies, harvesting the knowledge of countless species. They are stronger now than when they first drove us into exile. Commander Zoc of the Kronari military stood up, his armor gleaming under the chamber lights. You speak of deception and sacrifice, but all I see is betrayal. For 3 centuries, humans have sat among us as equals while hiding the fact that they once ruled half the galaxy. How can we trust anything you say? The chamber divided along predictable lines. Military species like the Kronari viewed humanity's deception as a threat to galactic security. They demanded immediate restrictions on human activities and access to the awakening technologies. Trading species worried about the economic implications of humanity's hidden capabilities. Some smaller species saw opportunity in allying with the revealed human power, but it was the philosophical species like the Zephyrians who grasped the deeper implications. Harmony of Thought rose from their crystalline seat and spoke with the authority of a civilization that had spent millions of years contemplating the nature of existence. We understand now why the humans hid their truth, they said. They could have reclaimed their empire at any time over the past 12,000 years. They could have conquered us all while we were still developing basic spaceflight. Instead, they chose to remain hidden to let us grow and flourish on our own terms. Their deception was not betrayal, it was the greatest act of mercy in galactic history. Dr. Nancy Foster, now working from the research vessel Discovery, presented her analysis of shadow technology to the Council. The data was terrifying in its Implications. The shadows don't just destroy civilizations, she explained. They transform them. Any species that surrenders becomes part of their collective, twisted into servants that help hunt down other civilizations. Based on our projections, they may have hundreds of conquered species serving them now. The debate raged for hours as species after species voiced their positions. The aggressive Chronari Empire demanded that humans be placed under galactic supervision until their true intentions could be determined. The peaceful Meridian Republic called for immediate unity in the face of the shadow threat. Smaller species aligned themselves with whichever position seemed most likely to protect their interests. Captain Rodriguez of the newly revealed human battleship Defiance provided a demonstration that silenced all debate. The ship, built using recovered ancient technology, performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. It phased through solid matter, traveled faster than light without entering hyperspace, and projected energy shields that could have protected an entire planet. This is what humanity gave up, Rodriguez announced over the communication channels. This is the power we abandoned to save the galaxy from the shadows. Every ship like this that we build makes us more visible to the enemy, but we're building them anyway because the time for hiding is over. The architect revealed the most crucial information last. The shadow fleet detected at the galactic edge is only the advance force. Our deep space sensors, hidden in the void between galaxies, detect a much larger armada following behind. If current projections are correct, the main shadow fleet will arrive within one galactic rotation, 1 year. The galaxy had 1 year to prepare for an enemy that had defeated humanity at the height of their power. Species that had been arguing about trade disputes and territorial boundaries suddenly faced the reality of potential extinction. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than anyone had expected. By a margin of just 43 votes, the Galactic Council agreed to form a joint defense alliance with humanity, taking a leadership role in military preparations. But nearly half the species either voted against the alliance or abstained, creating a galaxy divided at the worst possible time. Those species that joined the alliance began immediate cooperation with human military advisors and ancient technology specialists. The Zephyrians provided their advanced mathematical models, the Chronari offered their metallurgical expertise, and dozens of other species contributed their unique capabilities to the war effort. But the species that rejected the alliance began their own preparations. Some formed alternative military coalitions, convinced that humanity was manipulating the shadow threat for their own purposes. Others retreated to heavily fortified home systems, hoping to ride out the coming storm in isolation on the frontier. World of New Geneva, colonist Ben Parker witnessed the first signs of the approaching threat. The night sky, usually filled with stars, showed patches of absolute darkness where entire systems had gone silent. The colonial authorities tried to maintain calm, but everyone could see that something was moving through the outer territories, something that consumed light itself. Ben sent a message to his sister on Earth, not knowing it would be the last communication anyone would receive from New Geneva. "The stars are going out," he wrote. "Something is coming through the darkness, and I don't think we're going to be able to stop it." Dr. Foster's research team made a breakthrough. The Shadow Fleet emerged from the void between galaxies like a plague of darkness against the stars. Admiral Jack Coleman watched from the bridge of the newly commissioned Earth battleship Titan as sensors detected over 10,000 enemy vessels, each one larger than anything in the combined galactic fleet. The ships seemed to bend space around themselves, creating distortions that made them difficult to track or target. "How many of our ships are in position?" Jack asked his communications officer. 3,200 vessels from 47 different species, came the reply. "The largest fleet in galactic history, sir." Jack knew it wasn't enough. The ancient records showed that humanity's original empire had commanded over 50,000 ships at its peak, and they had still lost to the shadows. This combined fleet, impressive as it was, represented only a fraction of that former power. Captain Maria Santos led the first engagement at the Centauri Gate. the primary entry point into the inner galaxy. Her ship, the Horizon, had been retrofitted with ancient human technology that allowed it to phase between dimensions and strike at targets that existed partially. Outside normal space, the Shadow Scouts were unlike anything the current galaxy had ever faced. They absorbed energy weapons, adapted to kinetic attacks within minutes, and seemed to learn from every tactical maneuver the Allied fleet employed. Maria watched in horror as the Chronari heavy cruiser Iron Fang simply ceased to exist, consumed by shadow technology that turned matter into pure information. "All ships implement Chaos Protocol 7, Maria ordered, following the new tactics developed by Dr. Foster's research team. Instead of coordinated attacks, the Allied fleet began using random, unpredictable maneuvers and weapons combinations. The Shadows couldn't adapt to patterns that had no pattern on Earth. The architect downloaded its consciousness into a new synthetic body for the first time in 12,000 years. The artificial form looked human but moved with inhuman precision, every gesture calculated for maximum efficiency. President Watson met with the ancient being in the Oval Office, still struggling to accept that she was talking to someone who had been alive when humanity ruled the galaxy. "The main fleet will be here soon," the architect said, its voice carrying the weight of eons. "My sensors detect reality distortions approaching the galactic barrier. They're bringing something new, something they didn't have in the ancient war." "What kind of something?" Watson asked, though she dreaded the answer. "They've learned to weaponize time itself," the architect replied. "They can accelerate their own development while slowing their enemies. A shadow ship can experience years of tactical evolution in minutes of real time." Dr. Foster's team worked frantically in laboratories across Earth, developing the chaos weapons that represented the galaxy's only hope. The weapons operated on principles of controlled randomness, making them unpredictable even to their users. They were dangerous and unreliable, but they were the only things the Shadows couldn't adapt to quickly enough, young pilot. Amy Johnson tested the first Chaos fighter in a simulation that nearly killed her. The ship's controls changed randomly every few seconds. Its weapons fired in unpredictable patterns, and its navigation system deliberately introduced errors to prevent the Shadows from predicting its movements. "It's like trying to fly a ship that's actively trying to crash," Amy reported after the test. "But it works. The simulation Shadows couldn't track or target me effectively." The breakthrough came when Amy discovered that human intuition and creativity were the perfect match for chaos technology. Where alien species tried to impose order and logic on the chaotic systems, humans could adapt to and even embrace the randomness. It was as if 12,000 years of hiding had taught humanity to think in ways that the Shadows couldn't predict. General Paul Wright coordinated the defense of Earth as the main Shadow fleet approached the solar system. Ancient human installations throughout the system came online, revealing defensive capabilities that dwarfed anything the current galaxy could build. Mars unveiled massive orbital weapons platforms. Jupiter's moons opened to reveal shipyards that could construct vessels in hours. And Earth itself was surrounded by energy shields that could withstand stellar-level attacks. But the Shadows brought horrors that the ancient records had never described. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that attacked the fundamental structure of space-time. And worst of all, twisted versions of species they had conquered in other galaxies. The Allied fleet found themselves fighting not just Shadows, but corrupted versions of civilizations that might have been like their own. Captain Rodriguez aboard the Defiance led a desperate assault on the Shadow command vessel, a structure so massive it had its own gravity well. The ship was protected by reality distortions that made conventional attacks useless, but the chaos weapons could sometimes penetrate its defenses through sheer unpredictability. The battle cost millions of lives as species fought together for the first time in galactic history. Chronari warriors died protecting Zephyrian scholars, while peaceful Meridian civilians operated weapons they had never been trained to use. The diversity that had once divided the galaxy became its greatest strength as different approaches to warfare confused and delayed Shadow adaptation. The turning point came when Amy Johnson, flying her Chaos Fighter deep into the Shadow formation, discovered their greatest weakness. The Shadow's ability to adapt and learn made them vulnerable to truly random attacks, but it also made them predictable in their unpredictability. They always adapted in the most efficient way possible, which was itself a pattern. I can predict. Their adaptations, Amy transmitted to the fleet. They're too logical. They always choose the best response, which means I know what they're going to do before they do it. This revelation led to the development of meta-chaos weapons, devices, that operated on principles of controlled randomness designed to exploit the Shadow's adaptation patterns. The weapons were even more dangerous and unreliable than the original Chaos technology, but they were effective against an enemy that had never encountered truly creative thinking. The final battle took place at the galactic core, where the Shadows attempted to consume the supermassive black hole to fuel their expansion into other dimensions. Ambassador Martinez, now commanding humanity's greatest warship, the Rebirth, led the desperate assault with the last reserves of the Allied fleet. The battle was unlike anything in recorded history. Ships fought across multiple dimensions while time flowed at different rates in different parts of the battlefield. Reality itself became a weapon as both sides sought to unmake their enemies at the fundamental level of existence. The combined fleet succeeded in containing the Shadow threat. But the victory came at a terrible price. The use of chaos weapons had torn holes in the fabric of space-time itself, creating permanent scars that would take millennia to heal. Entire star systems were lost to temporal anomalies, and some regions of space became uninhabitable due to reality distortions. In the aftermath, the galaxy was forever changed. Humanity could no longer hide their true nature, and the revelation had fundamentally altered galactic politics. Some species welcomed humanity's leadership and the protection offered by their ancient technology. Others resented the deception and power that humanity had hidden for so long. The Architect, its purpose finally fulfilled after 12,000 years of waiting, chose to shut down permanently. Before departing, it revealed one final secret to President Watson. The Great Reset was not humanity's first use of such technology. The cycle of rise, fall, and renewal has happened before. This galaxy has faced extinction and survived many times, always forgetting its past to protect its future. President Watson addressed both Earth and the galaxy in a historic broadcast that was transmitted to every inhabited world. She acknowledged humanity's role as the ancient guardians of galactic civilization, while promising to earn the trust they had maintained through deception. The age of hidden humanity was over, but the age of open cooperation and new responsibilities had just begun. Dr. Alex Thompson, whose discovery on Kepler 442b had started the chain of revelations, established the Institute for Galactic Memory. The joint human-alien organization was dedicated to preserving the truth of history and preparing for whatever threats might emerge from the vast darkness between galaxies. We've learned that forgetting our past makes us vulnerable to repeating it, Thompson said at the Institute's dedication ceremony. But remembering everything can be just as dangerous. The challenge is knowing which truths to preserve and which ones to let fade. The Shadows were defeated but not destroyed. Scattered remnants fled to the void between galaxies, carrying with them the knowledge they had gained from this encounter. Humanity and their allies had won this battle, but the war for the galaxy's survival would continue for generations to come. As the Allied fleets returned to their homeworlds, they carried with them new technologies, new alliances, and new understanding of what it meant to fight for survival on a cosmic scale. The galaxy had been shaken to its foundations, but it had emerged stronger and more united than ever before. The stars still shone in the night sky, but they shone with new meaning. They were no longer just distant lights in the darkness, but symbols of the